In our operations area. We've been keeping track of Hurricane Dorian over the last week or so, and we can see the latest information here. Let's start off with the radar. You can still see that eye moving northward, and the movement is good because the core of the highest winds have moved away from Grand Bahama, away from the Bahamas. You still can get some of those rain bands moving through, but now at least the core winds are away from the area. Devastating situation. It's bad enough to get hit with a Category 5 hurricane with 200-mile-an-hour wind gusts, but then to sit there for so long, just a very devastating situation. As we move northward, you can see some of these rain bands. These cells move very fast, but they can bring some brief tropical rains. You got to watch out for those, and also the gusty winds with time. You can see 20, 30, even 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts with those. So we're going to be watching as we watch the forecast move northward. And one thing that we want to remind everybody is, we've had the winds are not as strong as they were, however they've expanded. So you can't confuse that with weakening. It's not. You still have a lot of power here. You still have a lot of winds. In fact, the tropical storm force winds extending out like that, and in some places stretching out 175 miles. Hurricane force winds, especially in the forward quadrant here, about 60 miles out. So that's right off the coast. So even though the center we're forecast to be off the coast of Florida, it's close enough, especially when you have winds 60 miles out, that we still have that hurricane warning. Just in case there's a little wobble, a little wiggle, you can get pretty close to the coastline there. So let's go out in time. This right here is 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 2 a.m. Thursday, 2 p.m. Thursday. You can see it's accelerating, and then by 2 p.m. on Friday, off the coast of Cape Hatteras and moving very rapidly. So with time, we're going to speed it up, but in the meantime, a lot of that impacts. We get really close to the coastline here of South Carolina and North Carolina, and even the cone stretching inland. So we have to be ready for those impacts. Florida's seeing those impacts now, and then soon for Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even portions of Virginia. And we have issued, this is the latest advisory, we've put out the hurricane warning for portions of the South Carolina and North Carolina coast, and then the hurricane watch, because that'll be 48 hours and in the warning area within 36 hours. So I'm going to see those impacts. We're going to be dealing with a hurricane for the remainder of the week, and we've been dealing with it for a while, so it's been definitely a marathon event. One of the big factors that we have with the dangers of a hurricane, in fact, if you look back in history, half the fatalities associated with the storm surge, we still have the dangers. We've seen some of the videos of the storm surge happening around Melbourne and some of the coastal areas and the beaches with 2 to 4 foot of storm surge. But look at what happens when we move northward, where the water seems to get trapped in some of these areas, 3 to 5 feet. We're looking towards the Palm Coast, Jacksonville, up towards Savannah, and some of that further inland. I mean, we talk about the storm surge. Some places, depending on the coast, depending on the bathymetry, depending on the elevation, some places it's right along the coastline. But look what happens when we go north. It stretches inland. And in fact, some of these areas in Georgia and also Savannah and Charleston, some of that storm surge gets further inland. If we move further north, we start looking at portions of South Carolina, even into North Carolina, 4 to 7 feet in some of these areas, and around, we look toward Jacksonville, back in North Carolina, we see some of these values of 3 to 5 feet. But something to note up here, if you notice, some of this isn't just coastal. I mean, we think about storm surge as being right on the coast, as we see in some areas, but look how far inland you can go with some of this storm surge. And that's some of your rivers, some of your inlets. The water gets into basically every nook and cranny, and where those river channels start to narrow, that water piles up. So remember that. You don't have to be just on the coast to get the storm surge. If those local officials tell you that you don't need to be there, you need to evacuate, please listen to them. And I can tell you, it already happened here in Florida. We've been talking about that storm surge getting there early, well before the storm, and that can happen up here too. Don't wait till the last minute. That water starts covering the road and you can't get out. So make sure you listen to the local officials and get out as soon as they tell you to. Rainfall, Dennis, look at this. It's a lot of rain. Most of it is right along the core, right around the center of the storm and to the right. However, little movements. Remember, we talked about that cone. Some of that, the cone indicates the center could be a little inland, but 6 to 10 inches right there on the coast of South Carolina, reaching up into North Carolina, but 10 to 15 right off the coast. But some of this gets right on the coast of North Carolina, so very dangerous. A little change in that movement, these values move too. So if it's a little further inland with the center, these values can move inland as well. So that's the latest information. We've got a ways to go. Please remember, even if the center's offshore, it's a large storm. You can see the winds, you can see the storm surge, and a dangerous situation. The local office, the weather forecast offices, there's 122 of them. Dennis, we're going to try to meander over here and get there. they keep an eye on the local area. They're the experts. Every little spot in their county warning areas, they have to issue warnings, tornado warnings, issue the flash flood warnings, and they brief the local emergency managers, big partners, as the National Weather Service looks at a weather-ready nation, and the big whole NOAA family. We look at being together, and we have a forecast office in the building right here. This is the National Weather Service forecast office here in Miami, and responsible for, I mean, look at it, just really busy. They've been busy watching all the storms. They have to look for tornadoes and some of those rain bands, or any flash flooding. They've been doing briefings. I know Pablo's been doing briefings like crazy, trying to make sure the local emergency managers have all the information that they need. So this is an amazing group. You can see they're really watching the screens, keeping people safe. So Pablo, if you wanted to come over here closer, so there's a little barrier there. We're going to get a little closer with Pablo. So,
all right.
Yeah, come on over. Pablo, introduce yourself and tell us what everyone's doing here.
Sure. Well, we are the National Weather Service Forecast Office here in Miami. We are responsible for all of South Florida. You can see that map in the background there. That's the area we serve, which includes the area close to Palm Beach County, which was the closest point of approach in Southern Florida from Hurricane Dorian. So over the last several days, we've been intensely supporting our emergency managers, making those tough decisions, whether to evacuate, not evacuate, how many people to evacuate. That's what we've been doing here, monitoring the weather. You can see the hurricane now moving away from the waters. Just now we canceled the last warning left for a portion of our area. That's for Palm Beach. We've been very busy since last Wednesday, since this all started now, and we were here the whole weekend monitoring this hurricane as it was moving closer to the Bahamas.
So doing the briefings, looking at the radar. Back over there, Dennis, there's actually a briefing going on in the little multimedia area, doing briefings for emergency managers, briefings for the media. Everybody's getting it done here. This is also where the forecast is done for South Florida, which has been a tricky forecast with the winds and everything. So I just want to say, Pablo, and to the entire forecast office here, just a great job. You guys have been amazing, really getting the briefings out and getting all the local information, the forecast and the winds. A true part of the mission here, keeping people safe, and a big part of the Weather Ready Nation.
It's a real team effort between the Hurricane Center and us here at the local level. They give us a forecast, excellent forecast here with the hurricane. We break it down for the locals. That's our job.
That's a NOAA partnership for you all throughout the Weather Service. So here we are. We've been live at the National Hurricane Center in the Weather Forecast Office. Let's keep safe. It's going to be a little while longer for the impacts of the water in Florida and through the Carolinas. And we'll keep you updated as we get changes. This has been Ken Graham and Pablo and the whole crew here at the National Hurricane Center.